Before we get into today's episode, I just want to let everybody know that there's a severe thunderstorm outside my house right now, so the ambiance of this episode is gonna be crazy. Unless you're an only child, you know that a sibling rivalry can be so satisfying, so thrilling. A lot of families take it too far, where the siblings just actually end up hating each other. My little brother Max and I are incredibly close, and anytime that we have competed over anything, it's had a level of fun to it, where the stakes never get all that high. There's not too much of a sore winner or a sore loser. It's really just for the fun of the competition. But some families, like I said, take it way too far. Today's episode is going to be a story of sisters who were competing for one single goal. And contrary to what you might believe, due to the stakes of this competition being so crazy high, these sisters actually were very close. They loved each other. They got along really, really well. In fact, they were so comfortable with each other that when Samantha expressed to her little sister that she was attracted to her father, her sister couldn't agree more. And that's when the bet was born. Who could get our dad to sleep with them first? That's how we'll know who the favorite is. Hey guys, and welcome back to another spooky Saturday. If you're coming over from TikTok, thank you. Really appreciate that. I know it takes time, I know it takes energy. Love you for that. Today's episode is going to be a little bit shorter just because there's not very many details about this case that have been made public, but it is a crazy case. I mean, there's a lot of incest cases and all of them are really interesting just because of the way that they unfold and, most importantly, the way that society reacts to them, because it's obviously an incredibly stigmatized subject for good reason. You see what I mean about the thunder? This is crazy. I hope you guys can hear it. I also think, though this case is really disturbing on a lot of levels, it is time that Spooky Saturdays cover a case where somebody doesn't get murdered. And I do want to say up front, if this is a triggering subject for you, you don't have to watch this video. Like, please don't. Just put your personal peace above consuming my content, because I know that the vast majority of victims of incest are victims who did not consent. And because of that, this is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. And if that's you, skip this one. You know, you don't have to watch it. And more than that, if it's going to make you upset, if it's going to trigger you, it's going to ruin your day, I don't want you to. I really appreciate you guys. And again, thank you for 10K subscribers on here. With all of that being said, let's get into today's case. Growing up without a father can leave severe lifelong wounds, whether you're a daughter or a son. It creates these massive abandonment issues, even if you do have really supportive parents, even if you have a step-parent or you're adopted by somebody new. Those wounds, they last a lifetime, and they can create really complex traumas. Some of the most notable psychological repercussions of growing up without your father being in the picture is low self-esteem. You're more likely to be depressed, you're more likely to experience suicidal ideation, you might exhibit trust issues or even people-pleasing mentalities by trying to get people to love you, to accept you, a huge fear of abandonment, a fear that people will leave you, having difficulty establishing strong bonds, being relationship avoidant, or, on the other end of the spectrum, becoming very easily attached. For Samantha, it was incredibly difficult for her to grow up without her father in the picture. Her mom was vehement. You're not missing out on anything. You don't need to know that man. I don't want you to know that man. We're better than this. We don't need him. But despite this, Samantha grew up feeling like there was a hole in her life. She felt like she was really missing out. She felt like other kids in class, when their parents would come pick them up and she would see their dads, that it was unfair, that she was being dealt this great injustice, that she was missing out. And how could she not feel that way? I think pretty much anybody who grows up without one or both of their parents in the picture would feel the same. And so for her, it became a thorn in her side, where for years and years she would constantly bring it up to her mother. I want to know my dad. I want to at least see if he wants to get to know me. If he doesn't want to get to know me, at least I want to know his name. I want to know what he looks like. I want to know if he looks like me. These are all fair questions and desires. And so Samantha couldn't really understand why her mother was so emphatic about refusing to let her have contact with her biological father. I mean, yeah, he had walked out on her when she was a baby. And maybe if she met him, she wouldn't even want him to be in her life. But she couldn't help but feel like she was being robbed of the option of choice. She felt like, yeah, maybe her mom is right. Maybe her mom knows better because she actually had the opportunity to know her father. And maybe she was trying to protect her from him for a good reason. But that being said, the older she got, the closer she became to being a legal adult, the more she felt that the ball was in her court. And this was a decision that she deserved to be able to make for herself. And as time went on, her mother, though reluctant, found that she couldn't really argue with that. And so when Samantha reached 17 years of age, she was almost a legal adult, when she asked to finally have her father's identity revealed to her so that she might be able to reach out, potentially reconnect, develop a relationship. Her mom finally said yes. And it's at this point that Samantha Kershner and Travis Fieldgrove came into each other's lives once again. Samantha's mother and Travis had broken up when she was still a baby. It seems from old Facebook posts that I found of them talking to each other publicly that they had a really tumultuous relationship. They would sort of oscillate back and forth between claiming each other loudly and proudly, sort of shouting from the mountaintops that even though they'd been through a lot of ups and downs and their relationship hadn't always been the best, they were proud to love each other. And then the next day, there would be posts saying that they were no longer together, that they didn't want anything to do with each other. The other party would be commenting below, "Baby, please come home." And it just seemed like they were caught up in this vicious cycle until it finally came to an end. I think that that was a large part of the reason why Samantha's mother didn't want her to have a relationship with Travis, because she hadn't really had a positive experience with him herself. And it's not like he had stepped up and tried to develop a relationship with Samantha over the past 17 years. It's unclear how Samantha was able to reconnect with Travis. I tried to find more information, like, did she send him a message on Facebook? Did her mother still have his contact? And I couldn't really get a clear answer on just how contact was made, but I do know when contact was made. So shortly after Samantha had finally gotten her mother to reveal Travis's identity, she was 17 years old, like I said, and it seems that she very quickly made contact with Travis. So they come into each other's lives when she is still a minor. And this is really important context, I feel. She also had a half-sister that Travis had had with another woman after Samantha's mother and him had broken up, who was approximately, from what I could tell, reports varied, approximately 15 years old at the time that Samantha was 17 years old. The half-sister's identity has been made anonymous, so for the sake of this video, I'm just going to call her Amy. When Samantha and Amy first were introduced to one another, they immediately became best friends of sorts. It was really exciting for both of them to be reconnected with a long-lost sibling like this, and they actually had a lot in common, so they quickly became friends. The custody arrangement between Travis and Amy's mother isn't public information due to the fact that Amy is the younger of the two girls. Her identity has not been made public, and therefore when I was trying to research this case, there was very little information to go off of in terms of what the custody agreement is with Amy's mother and Travis. But it is clear, just based off of the way that this story unfolds, that he had to have had at least partial custody or visiting privileges with Amy, because it is very apparent that Amy, Travis, and Samantha spent a lot of time together, which leads me to believe that he at least had some sort of shared custody in order for that to be possible. It's also clear that Amy was spending time with Travis without her mother present, so it doesn't seem like it was some sort of supervised visitation. More than that, it seems that Amy and Travis had a really strong relationship as father and daughter. She was sort of the golden child growing up, and she was really a daddy's girl. So despite whatever the custody agreement may have been, it seems that her father was her preferred parent, at least on an interpersonal level. As a result of this, she wasn't really prepared for the way Samantha coming into the picture could affect her time with her dad. Though she really liked Samantha, she didn't have anything against her, she just wasn't really bracing for the fact that if there's another sibling who's going to be around on a regular basis, then her dad's going to have to divide his time. And initially, of course, like, Amy was happy to share time with her dad. She loved hanging out, the three of them, but it started to be a little, like, irritating for her, you could say, that every single time the three of them hung out, Travis was giving Samantha more attention. I mean, she was used to being the light of her father's life. And yeah, of course, like, you know, he is making up for lost time with Samantha, and she hasn't been around for as long as Amy had. But Amy kind of felt like eventually the shine would wear off and things would go back to normal. But they didn't. This is wherein the sibling rivalry was born, because even though Amy really actually loved Samantha, there was still a lot of jealousy there. I mean, she used to be Travis's favorite, and now it seems like Samantha is. So she started doing small bids for attention, and in turn, Samantha would do small bids for attention, and they sort of started ping-ponging back and forth to see who could hold Travis's attention longer. And while a lot of parents would find this a little bit concerning, they don't want their kids to feel like they have a favorite. They don't want their kids to be fighting with each other for love and attention and resources. Travis wasn't really a normal father in that regard. He actually liked that the girls had established a competition with one another to see who could get more of his attention, and he would buy into it, sort of fan the flames, if you will. And this wasn't something that was just subconsciously happening either. The girls would openly discuss this with one another because, again, they were still friends even though they had this blossoming rivalry with one another. So they knew openly what they were doing. They knew that they had a very real competition with rules set out to try and see who could have more attention from Travis. What started out as being bids for attention, compliments, fighting over who got to sit next to Travis on movie nights, sort of shifted into more flirtatious behavior, where the girls were no longer positioning themselves in a way that a daughter would who is trying to get attention from their father, but more so they started to cross into a flirtatious territory. The compliments started becoming more romantically charged. And this wasn't lost on any of the parties involved. In fact, there came a day where Amy and Samantha sat down and they decided to make the bet official. They had both been getting flirtier and flirtier with Travis, and he had been buying right into it and flirting right back, as disgusting as that is. And before anybody gets confused and thinks that this is something that has just started happening over the course of like a month of Samantha being in Travis's life, you would be wrong. This is something that had been slowly heating up over the course of 4 years. This competition had been brewing for 4 years. So Samantha was no longer 17 years old. She had now been flirting with her dad well into adulthood. And more significantly than that, Travis had been fueling those flames for 4 years as well. And so there is a case to be made here that this weird, flirtatious, incestuous behavior from Travis had been normalized to Samantha and Amy since they were minors crossing into adulthood, which would constitute as grooming. And it's at this point in the story that I want to bring up GSA, which stands for genetic attraction. GSA is a theory. It's a hypothesis, and it is highly contested. The hypothesis goes as follows. Direct relatives who are separated from the time of birth or very early childhood and then reunited once more are likely to develop an extremely strong sexual bond with one another due to their genetic similarities. The hypothesis goes that this can happen between direct siblings, it can happen with a parent and a child, and that the reason that it happens is because when you grow up with somebody who you know is your direct relative, you're socialized out of these romantic feelings. You know that that is not appropriate, and so your body reacts to it and understands that this is not somebody who you're supposed to have those feelings for. But when you're separated in the event of adoption or some sort of traumatic event, or even something like Samantha and Travis, where she just grew up with her mom rather than her dad, and then you're reunited as adults, your body can get chemically and genetically confused. And these genetic similarities become a point of attraction. There is some science to back this up, because a lot of times psychologically, when you see somebody who is very similar to you, you're put at ease because your body recognizes this as somebody who looks like you, and therefore it's familiar, and therefore it seems safer. But like I said, this hypothesis is highly criticized because there's science pointing in the opposite direction. Obviously, genetically, you are much more likely to produce stronger, healthier offspring when you're with somebody who is genetically dissimilar, somebody who's genetically very different than you. That creates a stronger bloodline. When you have a child with somebody who has very different genetics than you, say you're predisposed for this bad thing, maybe they have genetics that fight that same bad thing, and it acts as a counterweight. Whereas if you end up having children with somebody who has the same genetics as you, those bad genetics don't get a counterweight. In fact, they get doubled down on. And that's why you're much more likely to have children who have a lot of birth defects or are at risk for birth defects. Experts feel so strongly that this hypothesis is pseudoscience that they've come out and said things like, quote, "It is a ridiculous hypothesis that works to excuse gross and abusive relationships." Another reason why it's highly contested is because it can't really be diagnosed. The reason why I'm bringing up this highly contested hypothesis is because anytime there is a story of incest that's born out of direct family members not being around each other until they're adults, or at the very least, in this case, older teens, the hypothesis gets brought up as a way to sort of excuse the following crimes. There are even advocacy groups led by people who claim to be in consensually incestuous relationships who are trying to work to get litigation to change to allow them to be legally wed to one another so long as they agree to sterilize themselves. My point being that the rabbit hole as far as this subject goes is much deeper than many people would think. I think a lot of people feel that when this subject comes up, it's obvious that you just dismiss it right away as weird, divergent behavior. But you would be surprised just how many people feel contrary to that. Through researching this subject, through researching this case, I was exposed to quite a lot of forums of people who basically advocate that as long as everybody is a willing participant, that this is something that is up to your discretion. There's even people who make the case that being against incest is akin to being pro-eugenics, because one of the major deterrents for these relationships is the fact that children are more likely to have birth defects. My personal opinion is obviously that incest is wrong and should be avoided at all costs. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is that as you research a case like this, you will come across a lot more digital support than you might expect. Once Amy and Samantha had made their bet official, they both fully committed themselves to attempting to seduce Travis. And Travis seemed to thrive off of this attention. What I find especially uncomfortable and disturbing about all of this is not only the fact that Travis knew Amy when she was a teenager and is now not only comfortable with the way things have started to develop, but seems to be a willing participant. But Amy, again, we don't know the full custody agreement, but presumably Amy has been in his life her entire life. And he's not exactly dismissing her advances either. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be a competition. About a month after the bet is made official, Samantha and her father, Travis, sleep together for the first time on September 10th. This makes Samantha the official winner of the bet. For the record, it doesn't seem that Travis and Amy ever engaged in any sort of contact with one another, but I still find it very distressing that there was at least two sides to this competition, and at no point was this competition shut down, and it was able to continue moving forward for a month. Immediately after sleeping with one another, Amy and Travis become a couple. And not only that, but they're not discreet. They start posting on Facebook photos of them very clearly canoodling with one another, with captions that allude to them being in a relationship with one another. Samantha's mother, who had raised her for her entire life, was completely unaware of the turn that this dynamic had taken until she saw these Facebook posts, at which point she was rightfully horrified. After seeing these posts, she immediately contacted authorities and tipped them off to the fact that Travis was clearly having an inappropriate relationship with her daughter, who is also his daughter. I believe on the record, she actually said that he had inappropriately touched her daughter. I'm not sure if she had gotten any verification for that from any third parties, or if this was just a conclusion that she had come to through the posts that she had seen on Facebook. Regardless, authorities immediately contacted Travis and Samantha and started asking questions. And once this happened, Travis and Samantha knew what they had to do. They had to get married, because it just doesn't look good that they're sleeping together out of wedlock. Yeah. So a month later, in October, they decide to get married. And in the county in which they get officially married, legally married, incest is illegal, which means that these marriage documents, this marriage certificate that they submitted, is forged. Otherwise, they would not have been allowed to get married. So they misrepresented the facts and made it seem on paper that they were not biologically related to one another. And when investigators learn of this, learn that they had gotten married, that they are officially a married couple now, they obviously contact Travis and Samantha and ask further questions. At which point, Travis informs investigators that Samantha's not even his biological daughter, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. He isn't related to his wife. I haven't showed any pictures. I generally don't show pictures for Spooky Saturday. You can feel free to Google it, but if you're too lazy, just take my word for it. Samantha and Travis are very clearly related. If you see a picture of the two of them, it is abundantly clear that that man is her father. They have the same face. They look very obviously related to one another. That being said, investigators obviously need more definitive proof than just their eyes, and so they force them to take a DNA test. They take the test, the results come back, and the results prove that there is a 99.9% chance that Travis is Samantha's biological father. This was not actually a surprise to anyone. This was not actually a surprise to Samantha or Travis. they were definitely just claiming that they weren't actually biologically related out of fear of being arrested. Not because anything had been misrepresented to either of them or that there was any confusion about whether or not he was actually her father. It seems very clear from the details that I found online that they were both very aware that they were definitely related. They were just trying to avoid arrest. Samantha is taken in for questioning, and she actually consents to taking a polygraph. When she's taking the polygraph, investigators ask her, "Why would you want to sleep with your dad?" And it's at this point that she tells them about the bet. And it seems that the bet was really a much greater motivator than any sort of actual interest in Travis independently. It seems that the competition just heated up too much. The jealousy between the sisters got out of hand, and that was actually the greatest motivator for Samantha all along. Much more than it was a matter of actually being in love with Travis. And that once they had crossed that threshold, she had felt so validated in her victory that things had just gotten really out of hand. Upon hearing this, investigators were shocked, to say the least. It is very uncommon for there to be an incest case that is born of jealousy like this. Most incest cases are non-consensual, as I said at the beginning of this video. When there's a case of two adults consensually committing incest, it is generally just due to the fact that they believe that they are in love. So the fact that this incest case was born of a sibling rivalry makes it incredibly singular, incredibly unique. And of course, because of the fact that they had been making these Facebook posts, because of the fact that Samantha had confessed to this relationship and taken a polygraph, and the fact that they had gotten legally married, there was really no escaping the incest charges here. And more than that, they had an additional charge due to the fact that they had gotten illegally married. Of course, in cases of incest, once the incest is discovered, that marriage certificate is immediately thrown out. There is no process that they have to go to get divorced or to annul, because it was just never something that was supposed to be recognized by the state in the first place. Of course, the case is taken to criminal court. Travis's lawyers argued that he actually didn't have the mental capacity to understand what he was doing. They argued that he had actually been a victim of a traumatic brain injury and therefore isn't operating at 100% capacity. I don't know if this is actually true or not. There's been a lot of differing reports on this because there's just not that much information about this case that's been made public. So I'm not sure if this was just something that his legal team felt would be the best angle to sort of plead down, or if this is something that's actually really true. It's not very clear to me. Regardless of this, Travis was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, plus an additional year of post-release supervision. He's also facing additional charges for lying under oath when he got married to his daughter. And interestingly, once Travis was arrested and taken to prison, he did make a couple statements. He actually said going to prison was the best thing that's ever happened to him, which is not something that you often hear people say. He started taking classes during his incarceration period, and he actually ended up saying that the reason why he had committed the crime that he did was because he was ignorant and didn't fully understand the repercussions of his actions, and has gone on to deeply regret the choice that he made and all of the choices that led to that decision. Obviously, a part of his sentencing is contingent on the fact that he has no contact with Samantha, and he does not plan on having any contact with Samantha, nor by his testimony does he plan on committing incest ever again in the future. He's gone on to say that prison has saved his life and it's vastly changed the trajectory of his life. I believe that he will still be able to have a relationship and contact with his younger daughter Amy, purely because the incest threshold was not officially crossed. Meanwhile, Samantha actually did dodge jail time and was just sentenced to 9 months probation for this. However, she actually ended up getting arrested for something completely unrelated and is in jail the same time as her father as a result. She's also facing additional charges for lying under oath when they got married. But overall, this is just a really singular case. There is definitely a component of grooming here. There's questions about whether or not Travis has the mental capacity to understand what he was doing, whether or not he should have ever been living without supervision, if that's the case. There's really disturbing implications as far as his younger daughter's relationship with him goes. And all of this happened in 2019. So everyone involved has been free and back in society for a few years now, and we haven't gotten any additional information. We don't have any follow-ups. And so it seems like everything that we currently know, that's probably going to be everything that we end up knowing in the end, unless somebody makes some sort of documentary about this and is able to get all parties involved to agree to go on record and just give more information. But this is one of those cases where I really do wish that I had a degree in psychology, just because I feel like there is so much at play here that informs this dynamic between these three people. And it is just such a fascinating yet disturbing spiderweb of comorbidities, of abandonment issues and people pleasing and trying to establish a strong bond and then competing with somebody for this bond and then trying to leverage your sexuality to get a leg up on your sibling. There's just so much going on, and it diverges so much from the familial norm that it is just a really like darkly fascinating case, which I hate to say because it is disturbing. And because there's limited information on how everything played out when the girls were both minors, it could very well be much more disturbing than we even know. But let me know what you think about this. And also, Kylan said that he wants me to ask during every video what you guys do when you listen to these videos. We asked last time, and I got a lot of interesting answers. Some of you were saying that you do your makeup, others were saying that you were doing laundry, and so I actually do wonder, like, what are you doing right now? Like, what are you doing right now while you're listening to this? If you haven't subscribed already, oh no, just like think about it, just like consider it. I would appreciate it. And if you didn't like the video, that's okay, but if you did like it, maybe literally like it, because that does help me. Anyway, I'll see you guys next Saturday. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you very much. Bye!